I would like to first welcome everyone. I call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Governing Committee to order. Some round of housekeeping. We will be conducting this meeting via Zoom. All attendees, please remain muted until the public comment period. And also, please just wait until you're called on. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. All visual and verbal and written comments are public record. And again, to the board members, I ask that for you guys to ask questions or share comments, please raise your hand by clicking the button on the right side of your screen, and you will be entered into the queue. When discussions formally begin, I can call on you in order in which you have raised your hand, and after your turn, you can raise your hand again to be re-entered into the queue. We will now begin the meeting by reading the theory of change, and then our land acknowledgement, and then I will have Naomi call roll. Everyone good with that? All righty. So our theory of change is as follows. If we create a homeless response system that centers customer voice, meaning the people with lived experience are the most impacted, then we will be able to focus on meeting the needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. For our land acknowledgement, we would like to acknowledge that we currently sit upon occupied land of the Duwamish people. Let it be known that for nearly 500 years, these people and other First Nation people have endured and continue to fight for their sovereignty and against social ills that stem from the occupation, including but not limited to homelessness. And that one of the chief issues surrounding their population around homelessness is indigenous invisibility. And so we like to acknowledge them and uplift them and let them know that we see you and we appreciate you. I would also like to acknowledge the labor of enslaved African peoples who are now known as African Americans, whose forced labor built the country that we sit upon and all the systems and benefits that we have today. With that said, I'd like to now transition. Naomi, can you please take roll?
Thank you, Jonathan. Dow Constantine.
Here.
Joe McDermott.
Here.
Claudia Balducci.
Here.
Jonathan Hemphill.
Present.
Kirk McLean. Zanita Reed.
Here.
Angela Burney.
Here.
Ed Prince.
Here.
Nancy Backus.
Here.
Andrew Lewis.
Present.
Jenny Durkin.
Here.
Lorena Gonzalez.
Present.
Jonathan, we do have quorum with 11 members present.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And so now we'll transition into the review of July draft minutes. On our consent agenda for today, we are seeking board approval for the draft minutes from the July regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the July meeting minutes?
Mr. Chair, this is Backus. I so move.
Second. Prince.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Nay? Abstain? All right. The motion is approved. The July minutes are adopted. Now we will open up for 10 minutes of public comment. For the public, please, again, if you have any comment, type your name in the chat box and let us know. And also, so you will be given 2 minutes to speak and you will be unmuted for that duration. Thank you.
At this time, attendees should be able to type their name in the chat or raise their hand. At this point, we do have one person with a raised hand. Cindy, I will allow you to talk and you will have 2 minutes to give public comment. You should be able to talk now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Just checking. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear us?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Okay, good. I'm trying not to have the disaster I had at the Redmond council meeting. So you can hear me. Okay, but I also can't have the backdraft of my voice. That was very hard for me to concentrate. Okay, thank you for resetting. Hi, I see that 4 of you I have written emails to in the past and maybe in the recent week because I do have contact information for you. Well, a year ago, I brought out that seniors and the elderly and the disabled weren't listed on the governing board, and you guys promised you guys wouldn't forget them. But, I think you did, The veterans senior levy still is not activated. It was supposed to start in 2018 for shallow rent for veterans and seniors. Money was borrowed from it, not repaid. And now it's 2021 and the shallow rent money levy that the people voted on sits not contracted out. Okay, that I just don't understand. It's not even a lot of money. I think you guys should be adding more to it. Okay, there's also no level of quality in the King County Homeless Program. You list the Corporation for Supportive Housing as one of your partners. It's not one of your partners. You paid them to write a report years ago. They have lots of quality ratings. Please use some of those and have them written into your contracts. They just recognized the Foundations for Community Support in their newsletter. So they're obviously working with the Department of Health for the state of Washington. There's lots of money out there. Money, Medicaid money. Please go get it. Bring it into the permanent supportive housing programs. It's there. You're not accessing it. In your contracts, I've noticed you write expected to participate, not required. So you know what? You look at the map, none of your permanent supportive programs are participating. It's too much work. Plus, they can't find the staff. King County is going to have to hire people, give them a living wage, and I guarantee you they will want to work at these programs. I have a lot more. You've seen my emails. Please reach out to me. I'm not the best writer. So if I make mistakes, get a hold of me for clarification. I'm really serious and I really want to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Jonathan, at this time, we have no other public commenters.
All right. Well, thank you again, Sydney. And thank you for reaching out. I will acknowledge that you've reached out to myself and others, and we will be in conversations about those issues. You are seen and you are heard. Thank you for your advocacy. Now we're going to move into updates on the King County Regional Homeless Staffing System Setup and Organizational Values with Mark Jones, the CEO themselves. So I'm going to turn the floor over to them.
Thank you, Jonathan. I recognize that the principal purpose of our conversation today is to brief you all on the subregional planning update and to provide a budget briefing. So I will be brief in this briefing. As of this moment, 21 people work here, which is really exciting. Because as you will recall, for many weeks it was one person, and for several it was 3. So we are significantly ramping up. I want to give a huge shout out to our department directors, particularly Peter Lynn, who is ramping up the program staff in preparation to be able to absorb all of the work that will be coming our way in December and January, and also to Meg Clay, our Chief Administrative Officer, who has been making sure that, when we hire people, we can pay them, and simultaneously also prepping the budget for next year, making sure that everyone has laptops, and has really been a profound one-woman show. I came in the office the other day and she was like, I built these chairs. And I was like, I don't know that that's your job, but thank you. So I really want to give a shout out to the team for really being in startup mode and really making this work. I will also say, by way of update in terms of our engagement with our theory of change and organizational values, we continue, I think as the member of the public just mentioned, we continue to hold a floor in terms of livable wage. And so the authority has internal policy guidance on what the least amount of money is that you can make working here. We have managed to hold to that while also driving towards a significant, I think, staffing configuration. And I'm proud of that. I think because of that, we have had really robust pipelines and continue to have really, really strong applications for our open positions. Additionally, we are working weekly with the Lived Experience Coalition across a number of different fronts. Alexis, who will speak with you about the sub-regional planning, has done a really incredible job, I think, of incorporating people with lived experience and the Lived Experience Coalition broadly into that work. We also have, it has not been approved by the implementation board, so it is informal policy, but we are using our equity-based decision-making framework in order to guide our decisions and think through, how what we do can be informed by those who are most impacted. At the next implementation board meeting, we look forward to bringing that forward to be formally adopted as authority policy. I believe that is the gist of the really quick updates that I would like to provide. Chair or other members of the committee, do you have any questions on those things? Hearing none, I will turn it back to you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Now we will transition into the sub-regional planning snapshot report. We'll now hear from our sub-regional planning manager, Alexis Mercedes-Ritnick, who will give an overview of the sub-regional planning snapshot report. While the full report is expected early next year, the snapshot report will provide the public with an update on the work Alexis and our team have been doing across the region. We'll have a short period for questions and comments after Alexis's presentation. So I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Ritnick.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chair. And hi, everyone. I sound a little bit funny today. I am dealing with a bit of a cold. I promise it's not a breakthrough case, but today's presentation is brought to you by the power of NyQuil, or Dayquil, actually. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and just really excited to be here today to share with you all about the progress that we've made on sub-regional planning thus far. So to provide a bit of an overview on what I'll be chatting about today, first I wanted to touch base first and discuss what the sub-regional planning team's role is as it pertains to the larger Regional Homelessness Authority, then review our defined subregions, regional engagement, and then our progress around key components 1, 2, and 3, provide an updated timeline on the work, and then offer time to close and answer any questions you have. So a little bit about the sub-regional planning team. We have 3 main streams of work. The first stream of work pertains directly to the development of sub-regional plans for each of the identified 7 sub-regions, and that is the focus of really today's presentation and the snapshot report. But we have 2 other streams of work as well. The second stream really is around supporting ongoing engagement, consultation, and communications for other bodies of work within the Regional Homelessness Authority, because as the core kind of philosophy and approach to the sub-regional planning team, we get deep into community, we're engaging with a whole lot of groups. It offers an ample opportunity to also inform these groups about other work going on at the Regional Homelessness Authority. So we're supporting engagement and consultation for our programs division, which right now is really focused on standing up contracts and administering emergency housing vouchers to all of our providers. And then we'll also be supporting the community impact division when we start having conversations around data and data collection. The other stream of work that sub-regional planning supports is our kind of special projects. So just supporting regional infrastructure development work around the region, and then also supporting our sub-regions in severe weather shelter planning. To go back into the snapshot report, we have 7 defined subregions at this point, and I am not anticipating any more after this. And these subregions have really been developed based on the consultation and the conversations we've had with so many stakeholders around the region. It's really informed by what we've learned from service providers and folks with lived experience about how folks are accessing services. And as we as a team are looking at place-based strategies to support people experiencing homelessness and housing stability, really be able to stay within their home communities if they choose, where they have the most stabilizing connections. And so with that, for these 7 subregions, we've also been engaging with folks all around the region. I updated this slide this morning, so it is up to date. Myself, I've had contact with 231 different stakeholders representing 144 different organizations and entities around the region. And when we say engagement, what engagement really looks like is a sit-down conversation of about 30 minutes to an hour, sometimes more, really talking through not only informing folks of what the Regional Homelessness Authority is, what our role is in terms of addressing homelessness in the region, but further learning from them about what their work is, the nature of their services, and also what they've experienced and seen in the past year throughout the pandemic, and maybe how services have shifted. With that, our focus has really been with 6 key types of stakeholders. So our local jurisdictions, service providers, faith-based partners, regional coalitions, business, and then community-based organizations. And you can see the distribution of the engagement across of the region in this pie chart here. We are just starting our engagement with Seattle stakeholders, but I'd like to note that a number of the stakeholders we'd say are countywide are our service providers to the Seattle sub-region. As we move into our next tranche of engagement, because engagement is an ongoing effort within sub-regional planning, we are focusing our next kind of round of engagement, speaking with hospitals, school districts, law enforcement, and philanthropy. Beyond the one-on-one meetings that we've had, we also work on a number of different ways of engaging across the region. We've identified that there are 17 different sub-regional tables that all kinds of stakeholders attend, from service providers and advocates to just other community leaders. And so our team has a regular schedule of attending these meetings and learning from these groups, whether or not we're going to present and talk about the work that we're doing, or just sitting and listening and understanding the immediate needs that communities are facing. We also engage in a number of site visits. The sub-regional planning staff have coordinated visits to over 20 different service providers around the region, as within COVID protocols, and being as safe as possible, but really seeing a benefit and value to being in person and seeing services in person and making those connections. We also give council presentations, and we presented at over 10 different city council meetings, and also make plans to revisit different councils per request as well, but wanting to have that touch point with our elected leaders around the region as well. And then we send a weekly email update, wanting to have a regular touch point with all of our folks around the region. So it's a brief email that really talks about the work that we are engaging in as an organization, what are also some of the sub-regional meetings that exist and how they can get plugged into them. And for anyone that's watching right now, no, a weekly email update did not go out this week. I'm a little bit behind, but it is coming out before the end of the week. With that, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're hearing when we're engaging around the region. I really want to uplift in this conversation that there is a lot of burnout among our service providers, and there's tremendous staffing shortages, and that's adding real additional strain to our service providers. There have been concerns about some of the public discourse and community support around services. There's desire for our team, the sub-regional planning team, to assist in coordinating an outreach strategy for the sub-region, so there's greater clarity on which organizations and which outreach folks are covering what areas, to ensure that we are trying to reach and connect with as many folks currently experiencing homelessness. We've heard ideas on the roles our sub-regional planning specialists can step into. We've had some really great conversations with folks around issues with PIT methodology, as we found that the point in time count methods in the various subregions have had their unique challenges. We've been hearing about some of the existing behavioral health supports and resources not currently meeting needs, and also heard about jurisdictions that are currently collaborating and have created their own sub-regional strategies as well. And overall, we've also found that subregions with too few service providers have found that their residents need to leave their home communities to be able to access services, and which can be a further destabilizing experience. Going into some of the updates we have around the development of key components 1 through 3, looking at key component 1, which is really developing and building out what our landscape of services looks like for each subregion. The focus of the subregional planning report is really on this data set that we were able to get, which is a 2020 HMIS data set on bed types. So looking at emergency shelter, permanent supportive housing, transitional housing. And with that, the graphs you see in front of you show kind of the distribution of the different bed types. And what has really become apparent with the key findings of this initial analysis is really supported by what we're hearing from providers and folks around the region, is that there is a tremendous need for infrastructure development across suburban and rural subregions. Further, we're in terms of additional progress around building out a landscape of services by subregion. We are leaning on HMIS data, but also working collaboratively with a number of providers that are not currently within HMIS to better understand the services they're providing. And we're building out, it existed a number of spreadsheets right now trying to really flesh out and understand how services have changed throughout the course of the pandemic as well. Key component number 2, which is focused on understanding our funding and investment into service response. We've identified that 21 cities in King County are providing money to local homelessness service providers. This section of the report really also details the scale of resources needed to build, preserve, and subsidize housing for folks who are 0 to 30% AMI. This is looking to a number of the work that has been done, such as through the Regional Affordable Housing Task Force, final report and recommendations, as well as the Affordable Housing Committee shared revenue principles cost modeling that was done in the past year, as well as the 2020 McKinsey report. And this section of the report further identifies our next steps as we're building out a better understanding of funding going into response. So an analysis of state and federal funding, identifying also our local private and philanthropic investments, clarifying our investments from the faith community, and also evaluating what in-kind donation really looks like. The third piece that I want to talk about today is around key component number 3, centering lived experience. Our team meets with the lived experience on a weekly basis. We have a work group where we get a little bit tactical and talk about, and we bring forward things that we're interested in getting feedback on and wanting to co-develop particular strategies around how we're engaging and building out key component number 3. I also give updates at the Lived Experience Coalition General Meeting every Friday. But right now we're looking to potential focus groups and wanting to work further with the Lived Experience Coalition to develop how we can go about doing focus groups for each subregion to better understand what folks are experiencing. To provide a clearer look at what our timeline looks like, there are 4 phases to building towards subregional plans. Currently, we're in phase 1, where we're really just pulling together information that we can and also building relationships with folks around the region. We anticipate to be ending phase 1 by the end of the year, so we can really dig into analysis of the information that we do have and focus on that in the first tranche of the year, while also having continued engagement. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, we have a unprecedented kind of political change that'll be happening in the new year, with a whole lot of new city elected officials coming on board. And so wanting to get on board and have some continued engagement in the early part of the year to talk about the Regional Homelessness Authority and what we're doing, and further continue to strengthen our connections with all the coalitions that do exist. That will lead us into phase 3, where we start talking through and working on sub-regional action plans informed by what we find in the kind of gap analysis done, leading into a final phase where we are drafting and developing sub-regional plans and weaving them into the larger strategic plan. And with that, I believe that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions, and thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Ms. Whitnick. We're going to open it up for questions.
Hey, Jonathan, Mr. Chair, I have a question, sir.
You have the floor.
Thank you so much. Thanks for this great presentation, and I'm really excited. For the record, in the minutes, Councilmember Lewis, City of Seattle, really excited about all the great progress that is being made very quickly by the authority and making up, for the lost time on our end in getting everybody in place. I appreciate that the authority is really moving with intentionality and speed to set up a really good regional plan. And this is really good to hear in this meeting. I have a couple of questions that might be more issue identification things that are going to happen in 2022 that, I'm raising now just because, those deadlines are going to kind of come up faster than any of us want them to or expect them to. But there's some homelessness sheltering assets in the city of Seattle that are on wind down timelines. And I want to make sure that we're in a position with the authority to have the architecture of the authority incorporate those deadlines into the planning, which I'm sure is being done. But specifically the and the Executive Pacific Hotel, where the city is contracting sheltering services, is going to end on January 31st. And I want to make sure that as we wind that sheltering resource down, we're coordinating with the regional authority on how to make sure that that's a smooth transition and that we're solving for the folks who are using that resource and not, obviously not displacing anyone or throwing people back out into the street, and just making sure that as we transition over, that deadline is on the authority's radar. Our contract with Just Care, the joint procurement contract with between the county and the city, is going to end on June 30th of next year, which is a little bit longer of a deadline, but just making sure that we're in a position to transition to some other kind of high acuity sheltering service. And maybe that's the vision for the conversation we're having right now around having another high acuity shelter asset that the city council is exploring in our deliberations and want to talk more with our county partners about. I also just want to flag out of curiosity, if someone can speak to this, whether the authority is going to receive the Just Care contract or whether it's going to continue to live where it currently is until its conclusion. But just throwing that out there is another question as well. And I have a few other little questions, but I've been talking a lot, so I think I'll hand it over for those first, and then come back later for a few more potentially. So thank you so much.
Alexis, would you mind if I jump in?
Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Councilmember Lewis. One, I will, on the Executive Pacific and Kingston specifically, I will note that our team, particularly Peter and Lisa, have already begun conversation with the owners at both Kingston and Executive Pacific about potentially extending those contracts and what that might look like. We are well aware that there is a broad bed crunch that could be inbound, and want to preserve the good work that has happened in order to ensure that folks have places to go, particularly during the winter. And so while we are, also active participants in the conversations around exit planning for the folks who are currently in those two sites, we are looking at being able to also extend the utilization of those spaces at least through the summer, and do not want to, in full agreement that we don't want to lose that asset, and are looking at sort of all available resource to make sure that we're able to do that. On the broader piece around, I think that the Just Cares contract, I will say that we have not had any specific conversation with our colleagues in HSD about that contract. But I speak with Lisa directly all the time. I think she texted me yesterday. I think I owe her a text. So Lisa, if you're watching, I'm going to text you back. I think that we are supportive of the work that they do. I think that it would be inappropriate for us to speculate about any continued funding of a program where I think that as with many of our providers, right, Just Cares might be a strong applicant to something that the authority bids out. And so I don't want to speculate beyond that in terms of what we might do there. And then I think finally, with regard to just the sort of broader behavioral health question and the conversation with the county, I believe Executive Constantine has stepped away, but the county has invested a fair amount of money via ARPA allocation around I want to say $50 million offhand into work around homelessness, some of which is actually targeted towards the same population around high acuity. And so we're in active conversation with DCHS around how to coordinate around the administrative pieces of that in terms of stand up, et cetera. But, broadly, I think there's just more conversation to be had there, and looking forward to having it. I think that, this is a space where our job is to advocate for resources. And so, anyone who has a budget cycle that is happening, we're going to be in front of. And so looking forward to having similar questions for Councilmember Balducci and Councilmember McDermott when they begin their budget deliberations in a few months.
Thanks, Mark. That's really great to hear. And it looks like maybe other folks have similar lines of questioning. So I think I'll just maybe hold off a little bit here and maybe come back around if there's a couple more things I want to weigh in on. But definitely let's stay in touch. I owe you a text as well, and then probably a phone call. So it's good to have you back, and look forward to digging into this stuff more. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for your question. I'm going to open the floor up. Well, want to note that Dow Constantine has left the meeting, as he stated further. He had another meeting to attend, but he does have someone, a chief staff member in attendance to relay information. I'm going to turn it over to Jenny Durkin. Mayor Durkin.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just wanted to note, so everyone's clear, the Just Cares contract the city is keeping through June, and King County we've contracted with them to administer it. So the Just Cares contract will not end in January. I just wanted to make sure that there was some clarity. And I think what Mark was commenting on is what happens after June, but purposely to avoid that kind of cliff into the new year and to give the regional authority some running room, that we made that decision earlier on. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Are there any further questions? Louis, you said that you might have something that you wanted to, additional questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I will come back and take advantage of having a little bit more time here. So for the county acquired buildings through health through housing, it's my understanding those buildings are not going to be moving to the authority, but that it's potential some of the new county sheltering options will be moving. So if I read that correctly, or the way I'm thinking about that, does it mean that the services contracts might move, but we're still not really sure how those services contracts might move into the county buildings? This might also be a county question, but I'm sort of curious about the interplay between the health through housing assets and what services ultimately get housed in them, and how that's going to be coordinated, especially as we're going into our regional planning stage of the authority. So just sort of curious about the pairing of some of these built environment assets with the services, and how the city can be helpful coordinating with that.
I appreciate that question, Council Member. So currently, the Health Through Housing program it takes all those acquisitions and puts them on the path to rapidly becoming permanent supportive housing. And the authority does not directly oversee permanent supportive housing on the capital side explicitly. That's in the legislation. What we do have oversight around is the service and operating. The service and operating pairings for the health through housing buildings were done, and I wish Mark Ellerbrook were here. I believe Leo Flores. So Leo, raise your hand if I'm wrong about this. But I believe that the service and operating was done on 5-year cycles with the acquisitions. And so our understanding is that there is no need for the authority to be involved in a conversation around that service architecture or the funding of that service, of those services attached to those acquisitions until 2026. And so we look forward to having that conversation in 2025-ish, probably. The other sort of broader conversation around acquisitions, I will say, as many of you know, the authority is interested in pursuing our own acquisition strategy in relationship to the creation of other kinds of important shelter types, inclusive of our high acuity shelter beds, and then also our bridge housing. We are in conversation with, I believe, 4 communities right now about acquisitions that could be made in cooperation with the authority, leveraging those communities, either general fund or ARPA allocations, and then the authority, providing support around services that might go into those spaces. And so that, I think, is one of the ways, and I've been very clear about this, but we'll continue to state for the record, our goal in much of our work is to, as Alexis said, to increase infrastructure around the region. And so when we look at siting of new things, we are very purposefully trying to look at not continuing to put things in candor downtown. And so are very grateful to the communities that are in conversation with us right now. And hopefully, several of those will come to fruition. And I see Leo has joined. Leo, did I say something wrong?
Thank you, Mark, and apologize for the car. I'm coming to you from Redmond. The track that we have right now is that, as Mark said, permanent supportive housing, its capital functions will stay with cities in the county. With health through housing, we do anticipate that through the duration of our first implementation plan, which has an 8-year duration, that the contracts for services will remain contracted with the buildings through the county. This is a place, though, where Mark and I have had a lot of conversations, and we are aligning that regardless of who holds the contracts, the animating principles of them and the service model that we're talking about is one that we want to be consistent across the entire system and portfolio. And then finally, also a recognition that in health through housing buildings, we have agreements that are also directly with the cities that host the facilities. And so we are also ensuring that we are staying in alignment with the cities. And right now we have health through housing facilities in 5 cities. That's all I had to add, subject to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Floor, for adding that bit of clarity. Mr. Lewis, do you have any further questions?
No, Jonathan, I'm okay. Thank you so much.
All right, so I'm going to give folks one more chance. Any further questions on this subject? All right, not seeing any hands raised, we will move on to the next portion of the agenda. Give me 1 moment. Now we're going to transition. We will now have a presentation by Mark and Meg, the King County Regional Homeless Authority Chief Administrative Officer, about the authority's proposed 2022 budget. This time will be used to review KCRHA's 2022 budget and policies and offer any questions or comments you may have. A point of order is that we will not be voting on the budget today. This will take place at our December special meeting. Rather, this is the first look at the proposed budget. I'm going to turn it once again back over to Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to turn it to Meg, but just again want to give great thanks to the team who has done a tremendous amount of work in preparing this. And we'll also offer thanks to Mayor Durkin and her team. We have funding asks that went above and beyond what the mayor proposed, but also want to acknowledge that we did work closely with HSD, CBO, and the mayor's office directly in preparation of what went to the council already. The nature of this year is that it's weird. This is not how the budget process is supposed to work. And so I just want to be really, really transparent about that like we should have completed our budget exercise around the time that I was hired and then transmitted it and had this unfold in a much more regular manner. And so the nature of the compression, the nature of the special meeting is that is not what has been able to happen just because of the way the time works. And so I want to lift that up and be really clear that this is a collaborative moment that you are seeing, not an antagonistic one. And also that, we hope to be in collaboration with all of you in the future in sculpting our budget in a much more proactive way that doesn't involve these sorts of what feel to me like last minute additions. And with that, I will turn it over to Meg.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Meg Clay. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Chief Administrative Officer here at the Authority since early August. And really happy to present our proposed budget to you today. So there's some kind of policy setup stuff that I'll run through, but Mark, please, of course, feel free to interrupt me if I'm mischaracterizing or not saying enough about something. So what, by way of introduction, the 2022 budget anticipates maintaining level funding and current scopes of work for programs that are currently operated under contracts with the City of Seattle and King County. In the early part of 2022, we plan to do an assessment of the system and recommend changes for reprocurement of the system so that we would be under that newly designed system beginning in 2023. The authority has also identified, as Mark alluded to, additional needs beyond the funding that was currently anticipated from the city and the county, and we've been actively working to identify sources for those additional needs. The priorities represented in the budget include the downtown recovery plan, a high acuity response and community safety programs, the building out the regional infrastructure, addressing people living in vehicles, and our catalytic portfolio, which many of you have seen the presentations on already. Before I go into the numbers, Mark, is there anything else you wanted to add about kind of the background?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Just making sure. So our 2022, for the overview, we sort of have the continued programs, as I alluded to, that we're anticipating from the City of Seattle and King County. The proposed new programs, which include some incremental changes anticipated from the City of Seattle, also carry forward of ARPA and CLIFR funded City of Seattle programs, and our proposed additions of peer navigation and a high acuity non-congregate enhanced shelter. And then the authority's operating costs as well, for a total of $202 million in 2022. So getting at the workload of the programs themselves, we will assume responsibility, as I said before, for these contracts coming from the City of Seattle and King County. Amounts to as many as 219 contracts, totaling $119.2 million. Our budget also requests funding for incremental critical initiatives, including the downtown recovery plan, and establishing 150 beds of non-congregate shelter for high acuity customers, which is a gap in the system that we feel needs to be filled sooner rather than later. The continued programs, the breakdown of continued programs is here by the type of program. We have a number of contracts and the amount for each from the city of Seattle and King County. 124 of those contracts coming from the city, 95 coming from the county. And just a note here, we've received notification that the final inflation funding is being determined. There may be an increase in the city of Seattle amount if the inflation, once the inflation rate is finalized. Right now it's anticipated at 2.4%, but it may actually be a little bit higher than that. So for peer navigation, we have requested $7.5 million to create a peer navigation workforce to work with people through all stages of the housing process. And that includes a living wage and benefits for peer navigators and supports for this new role, including dedicated logistics staff, team leads to coach and ensure successful outcomes for peer navigators and our customers, and dedicated program directors, again, to ensure oversight and that the program is implemented as designed. For the high acuity response, we're recommending $19 million for 150 high acuity beds to ensure clients are able to exit to permanent supportive housing or other housing resources. And these include dedicated medical and behavioral health staff for these clients during their stay, which is a big part of that cost. So our current FY22 program budget gap is about $27 million total, which amounts to the total of the cost for the peer navigation workforce and the non-congregate shelter for high acuity customers. So moving into the authority operations, based on the staffing plan presented to the implementation board and governing committee in July of 2021, we're estimating about $10.8 million in staffs, and that is in staffing and operating overhead costs for the authority. That reflects our living wage policy, and that amount still only comes to 5.68% of our total budget. And currently our operating budget has a $600,000 gap. That's one of the other things that we've been working with the city to address. So this is our organizational chart, which is just the sort of basis for the staffing portion of our operating costs. And this is our overall operating budget with staff and overhead. Overhead also includes the $1.2 million for the HMIS software and taking over that contract, in addition to other software, office expenses, equipment, things like that, outreach materials.
Meg, can I offer one note here?
Of course.
I just want to take responsibility for something that the governing committee would not have seen before, which is that HMIS contract that you just noted. I was not aware of it and the cost attached to it when I previously presented to you all on the budget. And obviously $1.2 million is a pretty significant chunk of change. And so that is part of what has driven some of the differences in the estimated operations cost out. There was also another error, again, I will take responsibility for, in a spreadsheet that I wrote where a formula didn't add. Peter caught it. Thank you to Peter. And so some of the operational dollars, this is really weird, but the number was in the cell, but it was coming through as text and not as numbers, and so was not adding. And so it was COC money that was not being admin money that was not being appropriately factored into the total amount of money that we had available to us. So I just want to be very transparent about those two previously unidentified things, one that is a plus, more money, and one that is a negative, got to spend more money, but wanted to be very above board and not make it seem like we were trying to bury any of that information. Thanks, Meg.
Sure, of course. So that concludes the presentation on the budget. Are there any questions?
Awesome. Thank you, Meg. We're going to open the floor up for any questions anyone has. Please raise your hand. we have, for some reason, I know I just saw someone's hand right. Oh, Danita.
Yeah, it was mine. I just wanted clarification on what does downtown recovery mean? If you could just clarify.
Sure. Meg, is it okay if I speak to that?
Of course, that is 100% up your alley.
Okay. So we have identified a couple of things. One, a need to be responsive to our sort of our Seattle Metro downtown area. And two, that there are a significant number of folks who are living unsheltered in the downtown area, many of whom have some of those high acuity needs that we were discussing earlier. And so we have architected a plan that is, we believe, capable of being responsive to those needs. A tick lower than that, just if it's of interest, we believe that there are roughly 800 people living semi-permanently in and around the sort of downtown area, the majority of whom, again, are consistently unsheltered, and most of whom are chronically homeless, right? So those are folks who, again, have pretty significant needs. And so that is part of what you see inside our peer navigation request and our high acuity requests, is a need to be able to support those folks adequately. We tried to design this plan looking at system resources, frankly, in a way that allowed us to ask for as little as possible. And so a lot of our plan to create housing opportunities for the folks who we believe are living downtown rest on anticipated onlining of permanent supportive housing and other shelter and housing options in the next 3-4 months that are already anticipated and don't require us to spin up, whole cloth new PSH beds. And so want to give again, just a shout out to HSD, OH, DCHS, right, for the work that they have done in order to create that capacity in the system. But that's what we are talking about when we talk about our downtown work.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Are there any further questions? All right. All these lack of questions, I'm hoping that that's because you guys gave an awesome presentation on my end, it seems that way, and we're making good time. So with no further questions, oh, wait.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my apologies. Will we be able to get a copy of the presentation that was made today?
Yes, Mayor Backus. And I will say that in startup mode, it was yesterday that I realized that you all didn't have these materials, and I apologize. So we will get them out to you ASAP.
Thank you.
One last time. Any more questions? All right, well then no further questions, and this is our last agenda item. I'm going to thank Mark and all of his staff for their wonderful time, and I'm going to make a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
So moved. This is Angela Burney.
You have a second?
Second.
All right. Thank everybody. Thank you all. I was a little rusty on the Robert Rules of Order, so thank you all for going through that.
You just have to take a vote, Chair.
Oh my goodness. See, told you I was rusty.
Right.
Let's take that to a vote.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if this is Nancy Backus, if I might, for a discussion point,
Okay.
kind of along these lines, but it said that we will be having a special meeting in December, but it's not on anyone's calendars. And this date in December, there is, for a few of us on this call, a standing meeting that we would not be able to make it at this same time.
Okay. No, thank you for bringing that up. There was planned to be a special meeting next December. For the folks, I don't know, I'm going to defer that to Naomi and some of the staff that are working to schedule that. Could we see about how we could make things work with other folks' schedules?
Yes, Chair. So Naomi just put this in the chat, but so Naomi has been working already with your scheduling staff, all of you. And I believe has sent out a doodle looking for a time. So we will get that calendar hold out soon for the time that actually works for all of you. I also want to note that, again, like, in the future, we won't have to have a special December meeting, but we needed to make sure that we were actually voting on a budget that was real. And so thank you all for your grace in this startup period.
Awesome. Any further discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, I'm going to take it to a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, unanimous. Let's go. See you guys.
Yeah, great meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a blessed week.